A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Films I Should Have Talked About Years Ago, Season 2. And what I got to talk about today is a very specific Liam Neeson film from 1990. A part of his own early years, way before he became famous for the likes of various films that he made during his time, like Star Wars Episode 1. Yeah, less than a decade after this film came out, but Darkman, 1991, 1990, 1989, 1988, 1987, 1986, 1985. I could go all the way back in time for that point. Until I reach The Evil Dead, Sam Raimi's very first masterpiece. And what I got to show here is something that he did in between this and Spider-Man, 2002. This literally came out almost a whole decade after The Evil Dead came out. And 12 years before Spider-Man. So when you really think about it, it's almost an even equation between large time gaps. One big one in the 80s and another big one in the 90s. Up until Spider-Man came out, of course. But in this case, Sam Raimi's own filming career himself and his own history was about to unfold with a somewhat obscured, yet fondly remembered cult hit. Darkman is certainly one of those stranger examples that just shows that the likes of horror, comedy, and some drama and thematic elements may in fact be involved. But if anything, that's just what makes Liam Neeson on par with the likes of other modern action heroes that we know today. And the fact that he has had a lot of involvement with plenty of other films out there. Of course, I've talked about films like Unknown and The Ice Road last year. But in this case, we have ourselves another Liam Neeson film, of which that an Irishman is proud to be a part of. And wouldn't you know that it eventually got a sequel almost a decade later, believe it or not. So it's very close to Spider-Man as opposed to what we got here. But anyways, Darkman centers around a guy who supposedly gets killed, wrapped in bandages, and eventually goes on a killing spree, taking out everybody responsible for trying to kill him, including a guy known as Durant. Not to mention his own boss called Strack. So, I feel like I should discuss a bit of history here. Sam Raimi's equation, of which that incorporates the likes of horror and superhero work, blending them together into one, because after all, even though this preceded Spider-Man, Sam Raimi technically made this as a bit of a precursor to Spider-Man. He basically took his own elements from the horror classic known as Evil Dead and integrated some superhero elements into them, because by this point was when superhero films were starting to become very popular. And of course, while Darkman sure does have a lot of its own declinations and plenty of negativity, you gotta remember it for one specific scene. Neeson's at a carnival with his wife, and he basically chucks a baseball at a tower of bottles. And it's one of those classic games where you gotta knock over bottles and win a prize. In this case, he wants a pink elephant to give to his wife. However, the operator of the game refuses to let him have it. Multiple times they argue back and forth. He wants the pink elephant, he won't give it to him. He wants the pink elephant for his wife, he won't give it to him. He wants the pink elephant, he tells him to scram. And then what happens next? His instincts kick in as the Darkman grabs his hand, breaks it, and then chucks him through the freaking machine while screaming, along with his wife. So, and the fact that he just goes and takes the elephant, tries to give it to her, and then says, "Forgive me," then runs away. Yeah. What a scene. Such a classic, if you ask me. Amongst all things considered when it comes to scenes that are now turning into big full-time memes. I've really got to say, this one sure did make 2021 a lot more enjoyable. Man, with such an awful year like that, it was really hard for me to ever imagine anything good could have come out of it. Yet somehow, a few things actually did. Do I still want to call it the worst year of all time? Well, I could sure say it was so much more horrible than every other year I've ever had in my whole life. But right here, we are in a place where the complete opposite is happening. And I gotta say, 2022 may have had a lot of its negatives, but there's just been so many more positives than I could have ever counted that I'm at sky-high levels right now, filled with joy, satisfaction, and hope that the future turns out better than ever. Anyways, a lot of stuff goes on, and he basically kills a bunch of guys here and there, here and there, here and there, makes a bunch of masks based off of them to trick the others into thinking that he is with them and all that good stuff, eventually reaching Durant himself. But might I add, Darkman does in fact rip off the entirety of RoboCop Part 1. Yeah, as it has been noted by several people out there, including the angry video game nerd himself, in his Darkman review on the Nintendo Entertainment System game released the following year after this film came out. Last March, this was. But of course, since then, many of us have gone on to know that this film sure did have a lot of elements that we never knew Sam Raimi was capable of doing on his own. Unlike what he did with The Evil Dead, of course, and eventually going even further and far beyond with Spider-Man 2002. But of course, while Darkman does in fact end off with some amazing action scenes, including Darkman himself hanging from a helicopter, and then of course with the nice explosion scenes, and then of course with a guy who gets tossed out a window, not to mention of course the pink elephant. I mean, what more could you ask for? I guess there's probably not a whole lot you can mention here, but it still is worth mentioning. This movie really is quite a crowd pleaser. And even though the likes of Durant and Strack and everybody else that tried to kill him are all gone. Yeah, I just said that Durant is out of commission. But guess what? The sequel basically says Return of Kevin Durant. Return of Durant. Return of Durant? No Kevin, by the way. Kevin Durant's a great player and all. But I feel like that the return of Kevin Durant would have been a whole lot better than Durant from Darkman. Like, what kind of sense does that make? He was killed in flames in the previous film. How do you survive that? How do you survive nothing of this? Wow. I mean, RoboCop didn't bring back Clarence Boddicker. He was obviously by RoboCop's own terminal strip from his hand. Oh, man. At this point, I mean, this is just really how bad retcons are, but it's not like most retcons today. Nonetheless, though, Darkman really is a cult phenomenon that I will never forget. I've known about this film even before ABGN's review of the NES game, and so I'm one of the very few who really remembers it so well. So for that, my scoring of this film is going to be a nice old 7.5 out of 10. Pretty fair, the way I see it, but I'm sure that most films out there could do a whole lot better. And so, if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.